I'm Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, and this is Rendering Unconscious. This talk today was given at the conference Psychoanalysis, Art, and the Occult, held in London in 2016 at Candid Arts Trust. It's called The Cut in Creation and is a talk I gave with my third mind creative partner, Katelan Foisy. There is film of this event online, so if you'd like to watch the video, please visit Trapart Film at YouTube. That's Trapart Film at YouTube. Rendering Unconscious is also a book. Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry. Available from Trapart Books, 2019. Now also available on iBook and Kindle. Please visit our publisher's website, www.trapart.net. You can support the podcast by visiting our Patreon, patreon.com/VANESSA23CARL. Your support is greatly appreciated. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode. So, to begin, I'm going to pass around this oil. It's called the Third Mind Blend of Third Mind Oil. You'll understand a little bit later. But I'll say, Katelan and I are both practicing witches. We do things like make oils for the dead. And we decided to work on this oil from Brian Dyson's Day of Death until William Burroughs' Day of Death last year. We worked on the oil separately, and then after Burroughs' Day of Death, we combined the two, creating the Third Mind Blend. And the best thing to do is put on your third eye, just put a dab, but use it however you'd like or don't. It's up to you.
Yes. And also the other thing about our talks that are a little bit different from the other ones are, if you have a question, you are allowed to raise your hand and just say cut in the middle of our talk. And what it does is it creates a cut up of the talk, so each talk is unique to the audience.
But first, we do an invocation.
Yes.
Operation Rewrite. Maya, illusion.
Real challenge of our universe. I'll always be a word man. It's no calligraphy for closely. I'm quite sure someone I admire, French prose. He's one of my favorites.
And
thanks
illustrate
again.
that indeed.
Our look continues to unfold.
The final across.
Sacrifice ourselves, stop this cycle. And anyway, give me a distant ancestor's active concept of the state and how electrosexuality structures us and break the individual into history. The thrust is precipitated from it manufactures from the subcon.
But we,
this, another interest, is that
real
of
challenge
mutations and transference, time, relationships, and then call me 3
it's
years.
No calligraphy
in day, night.
For closely.
Change her surroundings. It's
I'm
no
quite
calligraphy
sure someone
closely.
I admire.
I'm quite sure.
French
a
prose.
spiral, a serpent's, electricity,
He's one of my favorites.
Operation
Thanks again.
Maya, illusion, do.
Be
Both
the
seem
true
will
self.
illustrate that precise confrontation.
situated
Yet
in
nothing
and
illustrate
matter.
that indeed. The final cosmic
by
world
and
was
pacify.
spiritual and physical come more
You
creative.
know the client.
Writers reason why the artistic
Become
world
a master
can't.
of your
It's not
no
sacred
fewer
play, but
than 100.
we physical.
It needs to work more.
Operation Rewrite, Maya,
Where those
Maya,
who are structures us, what the
illusion,
practice
do.
is. Why am I here?
Sacrifice ourselves, stop
I am
this
here
cycle
because
anyway.
you are here.
Give me a distant ancestor's
And let me
active
quote to you
concept
young
of the state.
officers this
Co-electrosexuality structures us.
No two
within
minds
breaking.
ever come
Be
together
the true
without
self.
thereby
Her is situated
creating
in
a third,
matter.
invisible,
By their
intangible
passerby,
force,
few know the
which may
clients
be
become a
likened to
master
the
of
third
your
mind.
no fewer than 100. It seems to work with.
Who is the third person that
Both
walks
seem well
beside
illustrate
you?
that precise confrontation to forget. Maya, Operation Rewrite, illusion, do.
All right. So we're not going to go into the history of cut-ups because most of you know that, I'm sure, at least enough. I really like the way the days flowed so far and the fact that we ended up with Burroughs and Geisen thanks to Graham Duff. I told him earlier that I purposely put us after him and he asked why. I operate, like Val said, on intuition. I don't know exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing all the time, but I just know that's how I'm going to do things. One of my cut-ups once told me, everything is an evolutionary magical activity. I think that's true. So we're starting off with Burroughs and Geisen. In the spirit of the talks and like what Langston was talking about last panel, these are not just ideas of working with these people, these are people that we work with. We know that some of you knew them in life, like John Balance. We work with them in death, so.
Yes. So I should go into my relationship with Burroughs first before I go into some of his connections and my connections. I found his work when I was 13 years old, right around the times when my dreams turned to color. My mom, being a librarian, was like, fantastic, she's reading, I'll buy her everything. And so I came across him through Junkie and Naked Lunch, and I fell in love with Naked Lunch because, he'll probably kill me for saying this, but to me it was sort of this book where you could start it anywhere in the book, and you could get the story, but it would be something different as well. And I felt like you could read it from back to front to back. You could start in the middle, you could start at any chapter, you could start at chapter 8, it's great. And go around. And it was the first time I had ever really come across writing like that. Then of course, I read about his work with Geisen. And as an artist, I'm looking at Geisen's work, I'm looking at how Geisen created the cut-up. I'm thinking about the Beat Hotel and wishing I was there, you know, 14-year-old Katelan's like really wanting to be in Paris and in the Beat Hotel and smoking cigarettes. And when I found out that he was cutting, you know, this, when he was like trying to move his paintings and he was cutting through these old newspapers. And of course he's having this great time because as they're flowing all over the place, they're coming together and they're forming these different sentences and he's laughing like mad. And he's thinking my neighbors are gonna come and think I'm absolutely crazy and take me away to a madhouse. And of course, you know, he shows Burroughs and Burroughs thinks they're fantastic too and they start using them and I'm like, okay, I need to know more about this. And I was always keeping a journal, but I started cutting up newspapers, cutting up magazine articles. Anytime there was a interview with someone that I liked, I would cut that up, and sometimes into little pieces, sometimes cut into 4, rearrange it. And as I got older in my life, I started going to like Bumbershoot in Seattle, which is a 4-day concert event, and I loved Patti Smith. She was just my thing, and she was who I loved most, and I loved Jim Carroll. And on that trip, after I had made a cut-up in both of their names and their lyrics and you know, their poetry came in it, I ended up meeting them and becoming friends with Jim. So I was like, maybe there's some sort of magic hidden in here. There's something that's happening when I'm cutting up my words with theirs that's interconnecting them. So later on, I'm about to move to New York, very unhappy about it. And I was very disgruntled. And I am dreaming vividly of Burroughs. Sometimes it would be fields of butterflies, sometimes he'd be attacking me with a shopping cart. So I was like, clearly the only thing to do is to write him. So I write him, I put it in the mailbox, and now I remember I pulled out this magazine, I opened up the magazine, and Burroughs has died. So I was devastated. I moved to New York. I am sitting on the grass at Pratt Institute, very unhappy that I'm there, even though it's a great school. Patti Smith, you know, Robert Mapplethorpe, you know, went there, and Patti was around there. And so I'm sitting on the grass, and this guy in a suit walks up to me, and he was like, "Hey, I'm Orion, what's your name?" And I was like, "I'm Katelan." And he was like, "What are you into?" And I said, "William S. Burroughs." And he was like, "Oh, that's my godfather." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Do you want to go to his old house?" And I was like, yeah, let's go. So I kind of took that as a sign, as I was in the right place. So Orion introduced me. His mother lives in Burroughs' old place in Tribeca, but he said he wanted to introduce me to his father, who is Malcolm McNeil, and his piece is right over here. And this is a collaboration with William S. Burroughs. Opuk is here. So Malcolm basically opened up this world for me, telling me stories about Burroughs and just Orion and his mother Val and Malcolm just bringing me into that world and introducing me to people that were part of Burroughs' life. And it was this amazing moment where everything started coming together, and I had always grown up with a spiritual sense. I'm part Romani Gypsy, so we have certain things we do, but this was something that was very much, I felt like, in my control and out of my control at the same time. It was almost like in a walking dream state. So that was kind of how I started working with Burroughs more, started working with cut-ups. When Vanessa and I started to talk and hang out, we realized as we were talking at Harry Houdini's grave that we were working on all the same things. So we decided, you know what, why don't we just do this together? Because I'm sure that we can create some brilliant magic out of this.
So we've been working on a book that's an homage to The Third Mind by Burroughs and Geisen, where we've replicated a lot of the experiments that they outline in that book.
Yes.
But then we've also kind of taken inspiration from the book and done our own series of experimentations.
Yes.
And this is our Third Mind photo, Slice, Katelan, and I.
Yes.
Homage.
So one of the things that I like to do is a lot of times when I'm working with Burroughs stuff, I'll take some of his stuff and I'll incorporate with some of mine. So this journal right here has a little of both, and so you'll probably recognize some Burroughs quotes in here, and some of it you might not recognize because it's mine and I don't remember what's what anymore. So it's, what do cut-ups offer the reader that conventional narrative doesn't? Cut-ups establish new connection between images. One's range of vision expands. Cut-ups are psychosensory process. You may read the column of a newspaper, your eye going back and forth, but you are also simultaneously reading from other columns. You can also do a fold-in where you fold the page to create a cut. Burroughs' work, Nova Express, is a cut-up of many writers: Joyce, Shakespeare, Rimbaud, Stern, Kerouac, Kafka, Eliot, Conrad. Screenshots from film, cut-ups. Films are cut-ups. Cut-ups are for everyone. Everyone can create a cut-up. The come-through with the coded messages have special meaning to the cutter. The first step in recreation is to cut the old lines that hold you where you are right now. All writing is cut-ups, a collage of words to be read, heard, and overheard. Cut-ups introduce new dimension, enabling the writer to turn words into cinematic variation.
One of the things we usually do when we give this talk, and it's to like a broader public audience that's not as familiar, is read like the first cut-up poem by Tristan Tzara and read Geisen's Here to Go. And we're not going to do that, but one of the chapters of our book that we're working on, it was really fun to make. We did an interview with Geisen and Burroughs where we asked them questions and they answered in cut-ups. So we pulled cut-ups, and one of those pieces, a lot of those, you can do cut-ups any which way you want. You can cut out individual words or phrases or just slice pages into quarters and that sort of thing. One of the pieces that came together when creating this chapter is actually a large part of the Tzara original poem, but different because it's cut up. So I'm going to just read that. In his manifesto to make a Dadaist polarity of its suppression of instincts, and in Power Away, take a newspaper that they, take some scissors, could be, as, choose from this paper an article the length you want to make your poem. Cut, appreciate it. I hope that time that you well. Next, carefully cut out each from regretting at makeup this article and put them all in a bag. He had, and now I know I'm strong. Shake gently. Other night, I was in a. Next, take out each. I'm being a bit spirit. This is to listen, to picture it. Yes. One of the other things I'll mention real quickly. So I didn't understand, okay, I'm trained as a psychoanalyst. It's like 15 years of college, post-college. So when I first was thinking of magical practices, I was thinking of the archetypes as more psychological constructs and understanding things in that way. Years ago, even though years younger than that, I was practicing and then got scared of it and dropped it, as happens. But when I met Katelan, I loved cut-ups and I loved doing them, but I didn't understand this idea that she introduced me to of the fact that you can cut things into your life through cut-ups, and like the story that she has with Patty Smith and Jim Carroll, of cutting their work with person and then bringing them into her life. Actually, this entire conference exists in a box in my room. I started creating a cut-up box about a year ago, so a year ago, last May, I did this conference at Fordham University on systemic violence. It was when Black Lives Matter was really, really huge and starting up. We were doing talks about systemic racism, the justice system, the problem with the medical system, the mental health system. It was really intense, even talking about it. It makes my heart start beating, and depressing, and I felt helpless. And then I decided I have to do something creative and fun because we live in this system and I feel like there's no way out. And what can I do? I'm going to start doing cut-ups. So I started doing cut-ups after that conference every day and writing down my dreams, and then started to see how my dreams and the cut-ups were reflected in one another. And Geisen talks about in the third mind at one point, like, you can only understand the feeling when you do them, and then it doesn't last forever. Like, it goes away because you kind of get used to like this magical thing that you're doing, but sometimes they're so profound that you just really can't explain how they're saying what they're saying. Anyway, I started first just cutting up my own writing together to generate new ideas for my own writing, and then started cutting in other people like Carl and Genesis and Katelan, people that I knew whose writing that I liked, and throwing them in the box, and then more and more and more. And then we were giving this talk, and Katelan was telling that story. I was like, holy shit, like Peter Gray, Al Kitzes, Charlotte Rogers, you're all in the cut box. You know? And now you're all here. I just had to let you know.
But another thing that we're working with is cuts in time, tearing through it to experience more than one time. When I started doing a lot of land work, it was because I was in New York and I was desperately trying to make a connection to the land because I originally didn't want to live there. And when you have to live somewhere for a long time, it's really important to make those connections and really get in touch with that history. And I was like, the only way I'm going to make it is if I really understand this and I really understand where everything is coming from. So I started I started in a few different ways. I started taking photographs, but I wanted to photograph certain places as if they were both today and say 1940s. So you may notice that, you know, Coney Island looks like it does today, but the way that it's photographed and the angle, it could be almost like it's from the 40s. So a lot of my film work too has the same elements. So you'll see me, I'll be dressed up, it'll be vintage, everything, and then all of a sudden, this modern car will drive by. And that's how you know that it's from now. Or it could be, well, maybe this is from the future. Where does this car come from? What happened here? So I started playing around with time travel. And Burroughs talks about this when he talks about intersections. And so he said, intersection pictures. 1964, picture of a plane wreckage with a priest with his hand in the air doing last rites. He made the intersection. 1957, wrote, old junkie selling Christmas seals on North Clark Street, the priest they called him. When he saw that, something clicked, and it became an intersection, time travel. He said, look for papers that intersect or amplify what you have already put out there, past, present, or future. Talking about exercises in time travel, what you photograph with what you're thinking about at the time, or what you are reading when you wrote something and how it projects you to a certain time. So one of his things was to think like someone else and make decisions as if you're them. So he had a fascination with Dutch Schultz. So he ended up writing the last words, a play called The Last Words of Dutch Schultz. And the last words of Dutch Schultz were very strange. I mean, he was completely delirious, and one of the last words that he said was like French Canadian bean soup. And, went out. But Burroughs did this whole play where it sort of starts from that moment and ends at that moment, and he wrote it as if he was sort of channeling him. So I was like, you know what, okay, I'll do that too. But I'll channel things in a certain time period, or with like, let me pick another gangster. I was like, great, Al Capone. And so I started doing that, and when I started traveling to Chicago, and he was born in New York, I started getting taken to all these places, and some of them I didn't even know he had connections with. So here I am traveling around trying to find these connections, but I'm finding them accidentally. So I'm like, okay, there's something to this work that Burroughs is talking about as well. So I started doing more film work where I'm capturing these images. Now my normal film work is very put together. I mean, I plan out every glitch, every single moment. If something doesn't sync up, it's completely planned. So when Vanessa and I decided to do a cut-up video, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And we will show you the video. We took a lot of footage while we were traveling around together, and I took a number of different sound bites. And a lot of them were people that were working with cut-ups themselves. So one of them, William Patrick Corgan, he works with cut-ups. So I messaged him and I said, do you mind if, I sample your music? And he was like, yeah, absolutely, totally trust you. And I was like, great. So then I contacted my friend Richard Kadri, who's a very amazing a photographer, and he's been doing cuts of his photos to make them look like film. So I was like, well, you're working with cut-ups, let me sample some of yours. He said, absolutely. So I said, do you mind if I film over your work? He said, no. So I started creating this. For every image that you see, there's at least 16 sound bites. Some of them you can hear, some of them you can't hear. And I picked them all at random, which is awful. And wonderful. But when I was doing it, I was really upset. But so I would do, okay, I need to sample something, Smashing Pumpkins. So I would just have it come up, and then I would close my eyes and sort of flick my finger down the mouse, and whatever song came up where my finger was, that's the one that got sampled. Or I would bring it up, and then I would do it again and pick the portion of the music to be sampled. So all of it was picked at random, and the images themselves were picked at random too, which is also very hard to do because you're like here with all these things and you're just like, okay, I've got to like try not to make this perfect. But we will show you this. And this is cut-ups and time travel.
Of your be the true
I'll always
self
be a word man.
structures us
It's
with.
no calligraphy for French prose.
Abraxas
He's closely, I'm quite
Why
sure,
am I
one of my
here? A
favorites.
spiral, a serpent,
Abraxas
electricity,
is,
natural
it's not
self,
sacred, okay, with
protonated,
situated and matter.
Wearing the big white hat. Seems to be in a hurry, but where he's going, he'll have time and nothing but. And none of the good citizens of Chicago is exactly...
The third mind is when two minds collaborate. Brian Geisman.
Your connected competitive dial as you dial the 5-digit access code at this time. Press the dial at only 1 or 0 before the 5-digit code or contact the carrier for help.
Dedicated to the mysterious, the unusual, and sometimes the supernatural. A program of
here because you are here. And let me quote to you, young officers.
The third mind is when
this
two minds collaborate.
No two
Brian
minds
Geisman
ever come
collaborating
together
in this
without
manual
thereby
elementary
creating
becomes
a
more
third mind,
creative and writer's
invisible,
illusion techniques
intangible
that traces a
force,
series of such
which may be
collaborations.
Hi,
Reasons why the artistic world can't operation rewrite Maya, illusion.
Now, these experiments started not on tape
Thanks
recorders,
again,
but
our
on
work
paper.
continues to unfold a
In
spiral.
1959, Brian Geisen said that writing is 50 years behind
By the
painting.
passerby, few
He
know the
applied the
clients to
montage
become
technique to words on a page.
Maybe more down.
Operating on the premise that I am God, but I perceive God to be speaking.
I'll always be a word man. It's no calligraphy for French prose. He's closely, I'm quite sure, one of my
A
favorites.
spiral, a serpent,
Abraxas
electricity,
is.
and elemental.
It's not sacred, okay with it,
Atonal.
but we physical. Indeed, the final across the world blow, spiritual and physical.
Sacrifice ourselves, stop this cycle.
Thanks again, I look continues to unfold
Have
the
a lot of
spiral.
people
Will tell you when the line is free.
representation of my
hang out.
spiritual more.
By the passerby, few know the clients to become a master of your. By no fewer than 100, it seems to work more than those who are. Be the true self, where is situated, and matter the structures
Become a
of
master of your, be the true self.
So it says, often with cut-ups, original writing becomes more concise or clear, or ideas defined. This allows the person to expand on their thoughts. And exercises are about broadening perception, taking walks. I recently did something for Atlas Obscura where I did a Burroughs walk through New York City, and it was everywhere that Burroughs lived, and I explained the places, I explained his connection and stories about his life that were happening. So there was 2 times in the walk where there was a very long walk, and you know, you've got to entertain people because you can't walk backwards and project your voice. So I gave them one of Burroughs' exercises, and that was a color walk. So he would go out and he would choose a color before he went out, and he would look for everything that color was. And he thought that it really defined and, you know, added detail to his writing, because each time, even if he took the same walk every day, he would find something different. And it's going to change because if you're walking down the street, there's going to be different cars coming, there's going to be different people, there's going to be something that's different every time. And another exercise that he did is he would, you know, go out maybe to a park or something and sit there, and he would kind of people watch and see where there would be little intersections or connections. A lot of times he would run into someone that he didn't know, and he would be like, oh, that person caught my eye, and then he would jump on the train and see that person, you know, get on the train, and then all of a sudden they'd get off at the same stop. And so what his whole theory was is that, you know, you're not going to notice it until you actually notice that person or that thing happening, until your eye is so focused on these like details that you're going to notice these synchronicities that come up.
And he was very adamant that we need to all be paying attention to everything around us all the time.
Yes.
That you might notice that you're reading about something and then you see something outside that reflects what you're reading.
Right. And I had recently written an article on David Bowie after he passed away, and it was called Lessons in Time Travel, Intersections with the Starman. So a lot of times, like, you know, intersections and time travel can be personal. You know, it doesn't have to be something that you've written or, you know, something else that's written that you're making an intersection with. Sometimes it can be a moment in your life that you're having an intersection with. So I'll read you the opening of this, and some of what I said before is repeated, but it's always good to kind of have that repetition in there. So this is the first page of the article. It says, I remember her handwriting, blue pen turned to black marker as she scrawled the following sentence on sheets of lavender paper. The black candle is secretly providing the white candle with wax and wick. Eternally I may sleep. I don't want to, Kate. That was the last thing my cousin wrote to me before she died. A poetic offering of what was to come. It crossed my mind as I first listened to the lyrics of Bowie's Black Star. In the villa of Ormond, stands a solitary candle. In the center of it all, your eyes. Now my cousin was known for her beautiful eyes. She had beautiful, huge blue eyes too. So this is what William S. Burroughs describes as an intersection. A piece of writing, art, sound, or music that reminds you of something that you or someone else created and amplifies it. The example Burroughs used to illustrate is the phenomenon from the moment a piece of his writing from 1957 intersects with the newspaper article in 1964. An old junkie selling Christmas seals on North Clark Street, the priest they call them. And just here is a picture of Newsweek, May 15th, 1964 plane wreck. The priest, where his hand lifted, last rites for 44 airline dead, including Captain Clark, left on North Clark Street. The news article he is currently reading parallels something he has previously written, causing an intersection. The position of the priest and the two pieces on the same street, their movements mirroring one another. Hawley's last words had intersected with Bowie's last album. While they related at the time, I didn't know that this would be his last album. As a young girl, I practiced intersection by taking walks, photographing, and recording what I saw around me. Later, I reflected on what I was thinking at the time. I commemorated at the moment. This practice continues to be a part of my daily life. Bowie's Black Star acts as a link to what is known as a black dwarf star, what happens when a white dwarf star has cooled and lost both its heat and light. Once it was revealed that the album was Bowie's parting gift to his fans and a reference to the theoretical cosmology from the Starman himself, it also referenced to Elvis' little-known Black Star, which was released in the 1960s. And then it goes into Bowie's, every man is a black star over his shoulder, and when a man sees this black star, he knows his time has come. Black star, don't shine on me, black star, keep behind me, black star. There's a lot of living I gotta do. Give me time to make a few dreams come true, black star. So that was an example of an intersection that I had. But a lot of times they will sort of happen. I had an intersection with a dream another time, where I had a dream about reading something about Taylor Mead, and this was before I knew him. And of course, later that day, I'm in a car going to a rehearsal, and the man in the car brings up the same thing about Taylor Mead, and then said, you know, I really need to introduce you to. So this intersection turned into a real life, meeting away.
David Bowie is a good example of using different behaviors and taking on different personalities, and that in itself is a cut-up as well. Taking on all the different personas that he did, it reflects like what Katelan does with working with Al Capone. I decided I needed a mafia boyfriend as well, because I was always hanging out with Katelan and Al. And so I picked Lucky Luciano because he's, the best in New York, so which take, And so Katelan and I have fun.
Burroughs took Dutch.
Yeah,
we've taken
it. In suits. Absolutely. So we get dressed up in fancy clothes, and we go to speakeasies and we hang out with them.
Yeah.
And it really starts changing kind of the way you think about things and the way you see
it really
the city
does.
in which you live.
And it connects you to that city, and it makes you want to understand the history of that city, which in turn gives you more of an outlook on where you live, on sort of what your focus points are. So it becomes this whole thing where you are communicating with your city through the different ages, through those times, and really just sort of connecting with it on a very different level. It's gotten to the point now, too, where I look at buildings, and if I have seen, the building that came before it, I can actually look at that building and see, almost like a hologram of what was there before.
And picking different characters from the city.
Right.
Like Katelan does the series of honoring the dead in the city, Callaway.
So I'm working on a series of gallery shows where it is working with the spirits of the dead. So, and I usually end up meeting the people that are, relatives of them. So with Al Capone, I met his great-grandniece. With Cab Calloway, his grandson is a very good friend of mine. So a lot of times when I'm putting these things together, all of a sudden, it's just these doorways are opening and I end up meeting people that are associated with them. And so right now I'm doing one, I'm gonna do a Houdini one, a Cab Calloway one, Lady J, Briar Peorge one, and can't remember who else. Those are the three right now. But, going into the magical aspect of cut-ups, it is a way of shifting vibrational frequencies. So when you're shifting vibration, you're essentially making the cut with the old lower vibration so that you can get to that next higher vibration. Your consciousness shifts, your body awareness, magical thought and process became more defined. Sigil as a cut, film as a spell, painting as a magical working. So I did a painting of burrows, which I did not bring here because it's big and it's crazy. It's an altar and it has all these things on it that are very hard to ship and take apart. But when I painted it, I thought it took me 4 days to paint, and it didn't. Apparently, I lost my mind for 2 weeks. And my roommate at the time was like, you were acting so crazy. She was like, you were drinking so much tea with sugar in it, and which I don't ever drink a lot of tea with sugar in it. And she was like, you just took on all these strange mannerisms. She was like, you would disappear for like a couple hours and just no one knew where you were. And she's like, I'm not even sure you knew where you were. But I had sworn that this painting had taken me 4 days. And the times that it took me, it actually coincided with Jack Kerouac's death, which I also didn't know. So that became this example of just sort of, what I call wormholing, is where you just sort of like disappear and you end up on another street and you're like, how did I even get here? It does happen sometimes. But it is also creating paintings and work as magical objects, which they were talking about in the John Balance work. So with the book that I did for this show, which is actually right there, back there next to the mirror, that became a spell within itself. And everything that I was writing into the book, I would write names and then watch these documentaries and see the people. And usually when I write names, I'll get like an image of the person in my head as I'm writing them in. And all of a sudden I'm watching these documentaries and I'm seeing these people. And I'm like, okay, well that's their name. That's good. And I also wrote in a friend of mine's grandfather. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we found this picture of him from the 1930s, and then it connected her to long-lost family members because one of them had that there. You're bringing in maybe sounds from the street. You're bringing in everything from that first memory that you have into that present situation. So, if you're remembering something from 15 years ago, this is like 15 years of remembering that vague memory and bringing in every single street corner that you were on when you remembered that the last time.
And then also shows how you can rewrite the narrative and rewrite memory and alter it, and then alter your waking reality as well.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to Rendering Unconscious. You've just heard a talk given by myself and Katelan Foisy, called The Cut and Creation, presented at the conference Psychoanalysis, Art and the Occult in London, 2016. For more, please visit the conference website, psychartcult.org. That's PSYCHARTCULT.org. For more of Katelan and I's work, you can visit our website, chaosofthethird-mind.com. You may also visit KatelanFoisy.com. Rendering Unconscious is also a book. Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry. Available from Trapart Books, 2019. Now also available on iBook and Kindle. Please visit our publisher's website, www.trapart.net. You can support the podcast by visiting our Patreon, patreon.com/VANESSA23CARL. Your support is greatly appreciated. For more information, you can visit my website, drvanessasinclair.net, or the podcast website, renderingunconscious.org. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode.
I whispered sweetly into the white wax candles. I'm leaving a trail of sweetgrass for anyone who wants to find me. I'll tie it to fences as I travel with ribbons and one gold coin, and then you too can travel this road. But I must warn you that this path is not an easy one to walk. There will be bumps, ditches. People will call you names and close their doors to you. But if you listen close enough and the wind calls your name, then you too can travel with me. And I can tell you that there's a sweetness in that alone. And then those doors will open. I opened the good book and placed my finger down. The twigs of the cedar tree he brought to the marketplace and left in bundles. The seed of the land planted like willow by abundant water would spread, creating roots. This is what the good book told me, so I collected the branches and bundled them with twine. While cedar protected against lightning, the willow was sympathetic to the plume. The puppet on a separate journey would be placed in the river. A man would see the interaction and a sign would be given that all was well. I walked the old streets with new markings. I remember the days of flickering streetlights and broken glass. The remnants of my friend's former home became cinder blocks being pushed through the windows of my former home. I didn't know what to think of this ghetto-turned-crime location. The Inferno isn't filled with fire. It's filled with memories and dilapidated buildings. It was built on pavement, leveling layers of history and patching the cracks with cement, therein concealing its former existence. The Inferno buries its history with skyscrapers and low-income housing few can afford. The Inferno doesn't want you to sense the wonders. It only wants you to feel the void. This is the curse of the land.
By the deadly nightshade,
I walked into the old temple. I roamed the halls, touching old stone and tracing my fingers along glass. It was the stained glass in the chapels that spoke. The carvings, the tapestries with years of history, blood, and toil weaved into them that expressed their language wholly. In the halls, echoes of voices. It reminded me of the small town in Canada haunted by radio airwaves. In the garden, I touched poison. By the deadly nightshade, there were bittersweet berries known as woody nightshade. I remembered their taste. The wind had become calm and gentle, the way she gets before change occurs. I lit the white candles and jars of honey, so many hopes and wishes crammed into sweetness with locks of hair and photographs. I said a prayer for each one of them, blowing 3 times before lighting the match. 7 in all. 2014.
The seed
That
of the
year was a
land
7
planted
year.
like willow by abundant water.
The dominant
would spread
frequency of thunder is 100
roots.
hertz with a rumble of infrasonic
This
in
is what the
between.
good book told me to do.
Something inaudible to
So
humans,
I
but resonating
collected
like
the
a low
branches
growl of a
and bundled
tiger
them with
before it
twine.
attacks its paralyzed
While
prey.
cedar protected
I wonder
against
sometimes
lightning,
what the frequency
the
of my
willow
body
was
was.
sympathetic to
If it's
the
my
plume.
body that haunts me, or
The
outside
puppet on a
sources.
separate journey
What is the
would
frequency
be
of all that
placed
haunts
in the
you?
river.
What is the
The
frequency
man
of
would see
ancestors'
the
rage?
interaction, and
She's
the
made
sign
friends
would
with
be
the devil.
given that all
They say
was
she is a
well.
witch. My enemy's tears.
I walked the old streets
Reveling
with
layers
new
of history and
markets.
patching the cracks with
I
cement,
remembered the days
therein
of
concealing
flickering
its former
streetlights and
existence.
broken glass.
The Inferno buries
The
its history with
remnants of my
skyscrapers and
friend's
low-income
former
housing
home
few can afford.
became cinder blocks,
The Inferno doesn't
being
want you to
pushed
sense the
through the
layers.
windows
It
of
only
my
wants you to feel the
former home.
void. This is the curse of
I
the
didn't know
land.
what to think of this.
I walked into the old
Ghetto
temple.
turned
I
prime
roamed the halls,
location.
touching old stone and tracing my
The
fingers along
Inferno
glass.
isn't filled
It was the
with
stained
fire.
glass in the chapels
It's
that
filled
spoke.
with memories
The carvings,
and
the
dilapidated
tapestries with
buildings.
years of history, blood,
It was
and
built
toil
on pavement,
weaved into them that express
leveling
their language
years
wholly.
of history and
In the
patching
halls,
the
echoes of
cracks with
voices.
cement.
It reminded me of a small
Therein
town in Canada
concealing
haunted
its
by
former
radio
existence.
airwaves. In the
The
garden, I
Inferno
touched
buries
poison.
its history
By the
with
deadly nightshade, there were
skyscrapers
bittersweet berries
and
known as
low-income
woody
housing
nightshade.
few can
I remembered their
afford.
taste.
The
The wind had
Inferno
become
doesn't
calm
want
and
you
gentle,
to sense
the way
the
she gets
layers.
before change occurs.
It only wants
I
you
lit the white
to feel
candles and
the
jars of
void.
honey, so many hopes and wishes crammed into sweetness with locks of hair and photographs. I said a prayer for each one of them, blowing 3 times before lighting the match.
Leaving a trail of
7
sweet
and
grass for anyone
2,
who wants to
0,
find me.
1,
I'll
4.
tie it to fences
That year
as
was
I
a
travel
7
with
year.
ribbons and 1 gold coin.
The dominant
And then you
frequency
too
of thunder
can
is
travel
100
this
hertz with a
road.
rumble of
But I
infrasonic
must
in
warn you
between.
that this path is
Something
not
inaudible
an
to
easy one
humans,
to
but
walk.
resonating like a low
There will be
growl of a
bumps,
tiger before it
ditches.
attacks its paralyzed
People
prey.
will call you names
I
and
wonder
close their
sometimes
doors
what the
to
frequency
you.
of my body
But if you
was.
listen
If it's
close
my body
enough
that
and the
haunts me,
wind
or
calls your
outside
name,
sources.
then you too
What is the
can
frequency
travel
of all
with
that
me.
haunts you?
And I can tell
What is the
you that
frequency
there
of an
is a
ancestor's
sweetness in
rage?
that alone.
She's made friends with the
And
devil.
then
They say she's a
those
witch.
doors will
My
open.
enemy's too.